Hi and welcome. I'm your host, Terry Bach, and the event is Rewrite Your Money Story series. And I've noticed that entrepreneurs are very busy and they're always working. And yet when I talk to them, I find out that a lot of them, in spite of all their hard work, are really not getting the financial results that they want. And many of them are working so hard, they're not even enjoying their businesses anymore. So I've put together this event because it's a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. And I've also invited experts who work with entrepreneurs on mindset, limiting beliefs, and leveraging to find out why we're having this issue and how to help entrepreneurs with it. So today I've invited Jean Monterastelli to the event because Jean specializes in helping small business owners eliminate self-sabotage. And he does this by helping them identify the most important actions that need to be taken, and then helps them clear any limiting beliefs or past traumas that might be getting in the way from taking those actions. And then he'll be showing you a way to clear them all. Very cool. So welcome, Jean.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
So I'd like to start by just finding out a little bit more about you and how you got to this place of doing the kind of work that you do.
Absolutely. So I just celebrated in the last week 21 years of being self-employed.
Wow.
And for the first little more than a decade of that, my primary work was, and I still do this some, was combining juggling, sketch comedy, drama, and storytelling, and working with high school and middle school kids all over the US and Canada. I work with a friend of mine I grew up with. And in the midst of all of that, I also found myself in the grips of really struggling with social anxiety. So I could be in a circumstance where I could be standing on stage in front of 8,000 people, and it was as easy as breathing. Like it was just effortless. I would fly back to Baltimore where I lived at the time, and I would get on the shuttle bus, which was going to take me to where my car was parked. And on that particular shuttle bus, there wasn't a button. There wasn't regular stops. You just had to speak up when you got near your car. And the social anxiety had gotten so bad, I couldn't do that. I would literally ride the shuttle bus until someone else said stop, and I would get off when they got off. I couldn't answer my own phone. I couldn't get help in a store. And it was something, like all fears, had slowly grown over time, but it had gotten to the point where it was really crippling. Like it was not only impacting my life, but it was also impacting the lives of people around me because the choices I was making it hard for them.
Right.
And so in investigating, trying to find tools that would help with that, I found myself to an acupressure modality, which is often referred to as EFT, emotional freedom technique, or tapping. And after finding tapping, within 6 weeks, my social anxiety was taken care of. Just done, done, and done. And so because of my experience, I started sharing it with people around me. Like I would be traveling and someone would have a headache or craving a cigarette. And I'm like, I know this really crazy thing. This is going to look so weird, but let me show you this really crazy thing. And as I did that, I started having experiences. And at the time, Gary Craig, the person who innovated EFT off of Roger Callahan's thought field therapy, had a mailing list where 3 or 4 times a week he'd send out an email that just had links to a bunch of articles that people had sent in from their experience. So I did the exact same thing. I wrote a couple of articles about what I had learned and what I had seen, shared it with the community. And Gary kindly shared it with his list and shared it with my email address. And people started emailing me, asking me questions about the article that I wrote or other things. Apparently they just kind of jived with the way I was explaining things and thought I might be helpful. And thought that it was really inefficient to reply to everyone. So I thought, why not create a question and answer website? And so I got a free Blogspot blog called it EFT Q&A and just started answering questions and slowly answered questions. And again, this was just because I wanted to share.
Right.
And about 9 months into that, someone sent me an email saying, can you please start selling stuff so I could buy it? Like they were getting so much value out of my website. They were feeling bad and wanted to reciprocate in some way. About 6 months later, someone sent me an email saying, do you do phone sessions? I like your style. And it's like, oh, right. This could be a business. So For the first 6 or 7 years using this protocol, I was a generalist. Like, I worked with any issue under the sun that this particular tapping protocol could work with. If you had an issue, if you thought you jived with me, we would work together. As time passed, I found that because I've been self-employed for so long, I love that kind of crafting and creating of business. Like, I was running my first business when I was in 3rd grade in the backyard. Like, I just have this deep entrepreneurial spirit.
Sure.
And so I thought, well, let's just get really focused and let's work specifically with small business owners to help them to eliminate self-sabotage. And so that work is really twofold. Half of it is strategic. I'm a firm believer that it's great to clear emotional beliefs and blocks, but if you don't know what to do, you don't know how to do it, it doesn't matter how many traumas that you clear because you still have no idea what to do.
True.
So I always try and solve a problem strategically first, because sometimes the emotional charge is coming from a place of not having the right strategic thing to do. I don't know what to do. I feel overwhelmed. There's an emotional charge. And sometimes we can just talk through a process and find a strategy, and all of a sudden the emotion goes away. Other times, once we know what to do, we know how to do it, we have everything in place, there's still some emotional blocks to that. So that's when we start getting into the mindset work and clearing all of that. So just kind of navigating my own path, trying to help people do what I had done successfully is how I've landed in the place that I've landed today.
That's perfect. Wonderful. And I can relate to that, you know, wanting to use it on everything when you first use it, because we know what a powerful tool it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. So thank you for sharing all that. That's perfect segue.
Absolutely.
So why do you think most business owners aren't successful? You know, what do you think holds them back?
Well, when it comes to taking action, there are basically 4 reasons why we sabotage ourselves and hold ourselves back. We don't know what we want. We don't know how to do it. It is painful to take action, or it's painful to be successful. And I can walk through those 4 and get a little more clarity to them.
Yeah.
And so in both of those, and all 4 of those, there can be a strategic and there can be an emotional component. So the first part, I don't know what I want. If you do not have a clear direction, then subconsciously you're going to prevent yourself from taking action because there's a part of you that doesn't want to waste time and energy by going the wrong direction. And so I know from my own life that if I am adventurous and I try things, I learn, and therefore I find the path in doing that. But the subconscious mind doesn't see that clearly. Now, sometimes that can be a strategic thing. I'm amazed at the number of clients that I work with who really struggle to have a clear vision of what they want. They have a vague sense of what they want, but they haven't been able to crystallize it into a way that makes a lot of sense for them. And so, again, it might just be as simple as going through an intake process and having a conversation where we're helping someone craft a clear dream. And that's enough for us to start taking action. Other times, there could be an emotional component to it. I had a dream before. I invested everything into it. I failed. That failure was devastating. Therefore, I'm not going to invest emotionally in the new dream because I'm afraid of that devastation that's going to come on the other side. And so now there's this mindset component to it. So we can see it can be strategic or it can be emotional. I don't know how to do it. Exact same thing. I don't know about you. I don't really enjoy feeling incompetent. And so I am much more likely to do the things I'm really good at than the things I'm really bad at. And so I might have a clear plan of moving forward.
Okay. I was just going to say, especially if you've had a past experience where it didn't turn out very well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to be in this circumstance where, you know, when there isn't clarity about what to do, it's really easy not to take action. And again, this could be a strategic thing where I just have to go learn how to do it, or it could be an emotional thing. I don't feel comfortable doing it. Okay. The third reason I said was it's painful to take action. Now, sometimes things are physically painful. Tarring a roof at 3:30 in the afternoon in August in Miami, that is a painful thing just because it's hot and gross and sticky. Other times there's an emotional pain to it. So for example, we could be in a circumstance where the choice that we're making is going counter to what our family normally does or believes. Now, there might be a really specific sense of work ethic and the type of work that we do, and to choose something that is artistic or to choose something that is healing is stepping away from the way our family defines ourselves and defines success. Or we could be in a circumstance that as we are having success, we're raising to a socioeconomic status that all of the people around us aren't, and we're afraid that there's going to be judgment. Away from the realm of business, back when I was a generalist, I had a client speak to this perfectly. She wanted to lose weight, and she said, well, no, this is for Bex. So, but the taking action makes it really, really hard because where we are getting. The third one, and this is the fourth one, and this is the example I was going to give, is it's painful to be successful. So, for example, the example I was just about to give was the woman wanted to lose weight, and she said, I've heard how my friends talk about skinny people. And if I lose weight, they're going to talk about me as well that way.
Wow.
And so they obviously, if I feel like I'm going to lose all my friends by being successful, then I'm going to be in a circumstance where I'm going to sabotage that. I had another client who, when she was young, every single time she was successful at something, that became the new standard. So if she got a 90 on the math test, 90 was now the baseline. And if she got a 91 on the next math test, 91 was the baseline. And so every single time she was successful, she was creating a new standard to live up to. And so if we're always afraid that if I have success, this becomes the new normal, again, it's an emotional reason for us not to have success. Right. And so each time, with each individual, with each task, oftentimes it's one of those four things, or we might find it's two or three of them, that once we clear one of them, like once you know how to do something, all of a sudden there's an emotional fear about being successful about it. Yes. And so it gives us this opportunity, so for me, to help them to look at each and every action. So you want to do this thing. Great. Let's figure out strategically why the action isn't happening. Now let's figure out emotionally why the action isn't happening.
That's a great concept. I like that. Yeah. You've mentioned self-sabotage. And so what are are there different types of self-sabotage? I imagine there are that we get into.
So basically, in almost every case, self-sabotage is something that is trying to keep us safe. So in some of the examples I've given, if I lose the weight, people are going to judge me for it. Right. So it just becomes a safety mechanism. So the first thing that I'm always trying to figure out when a self-sabotaging action is happening is to figure out, why does the system feel like it's dangerous? And is that fear well-informed and proportional? Like, fear's not bad. Like, I'm afraid of tigers. That's a good thing.
Yes.
But if I never left my apartment here in Brooklyn because there's a tiger in the Bronx Zoo, which is 8.5 miles away, that's a disproportionate fear. Right. When I'm running a business, if I offer you to buy something from me, one of my products and services, it is possible that you might say no. But if I perceive that no as you're judging my work and saying I'm a horrible person, I can't create anything of value, I'm never going to ask you. True. So the self-sabotage is almost always a way of emotionally keeping us safe in the short term.
Okay.
And the ways that it shows up is, as my buddy Brad Yates always says, we are brilliant in our ability to sabotage our own action.
True.
Because again, if you think about it, the first signal we always hear is danger. Like, emotionally, danger overrides everything, which is really good. Because if I'm standing in the middle of the street and a car is about to hit me and I'm going, ooh, 67 Mustang, I love late 60s Mustangs. Like, that's a bad thing. Like, I need to hear fear first. The problem is when it's not actually something that is dangerous. And so then our system is just getting creative in making sure we don't do that dangerous thing.
Right.
When if you came into my apartment, you would tell when I had a publication deadline, because my apartment is the cleanest place in the history of the world. You could eat off of every single surface, because my system becomes this really brilliant saboteur of going, you have company coming over tomorrow. You really better go clean the kitchen up when I'm sitting down to do some writing or to do some recording.
Okay.
And so the actions we take seem reasonable
Yes.
inside of a vacuum because it's just drawing us towards the stuff,
Yes.
or we find a YouTube hole to fall down, or we invest all this time in social media. Well, I'm marketing in social media because it's effective. And I'm not. I'm just avoiding the task that's there. And
Exactly.
so it becomes an issue of recognizing, like sometimes sabotage is really hard to uncover because we're doing things that are useful in some context.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it's not as if I'm avoiding work by going to play miniature golf. Like that's not the choice that I'm making in the middle of my day to sabotage myself. And
Yes.
so it's important for me to recognize at distance. So at the end of the day, when I look at my to-do list and I go, oh, these are the valuable things I didn't do. Oftentimes that's the only point I recognize I'm sabotaging myself.
Okay. That's mine too. My house gets really clean when I'm avoiding, the actual work that
Absolutely.
I'm supposed to be
Yeah.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably a pretty common one, I would guess. So how do we actually figure out what is holding us back?
So so there's kind of two ways that we can kind of figure this out. Okay. So in a conscious way, the question I always kind of try and disassociate and ask myself is, what would go wrong if I did this thing? Like there's
Mm,
an action here that's in front of me. What
okay.
could go wrong? And then the
Okay.
next question to that is, what proof do I have that that's a possibility or a probability? And
Okay.
so and sometimes there's proof and sometimes there's not.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the place that we enter. And sometimes I can't ask myself that question intellectually because I'm consciously thinking about the solution. And not, there are lots of times in which we cannot consciously find and uncover a subconscious problem.
Right.
So
Right.
when I'm bumping into that resistance, the way that I do it is I imagine myself taking the task, making the phone call, writing the copy, whatever the task is. Okay. And then I feel in my body, and then I notice where the tension is. It might
Mm-hmm.
be butterflies in my stomach or a tight chest or something in the throat or chattery
Mm-hmm.
brain. Now, when that happens, what I then do is instead of asking myself those two questions, I ask the physical sensation. And so by asking the physical sensation, what I've done is I've disassociated my conscious mind from trying to figure this out. And I'm asking my subconscious mind to give me some feedback. So I'll ask the butterflies in my stomach, like, if I do this, what are you afraid of? What will go wrong?
Mm.
They're going to judge your work. Great. So what proof do you have that that's the case? Well, you really believe in this. And if they don't believe in your work, they don't believe in you. Awesome. Like, I've uncovered this thing. And so then it gives us the opportunity to go in and figure out that belief. Is the belief well informed? And is the response proportional? So that's always the goal when we do this, is once we find the belief and once we find the responses, to figure out, is it a well-informed response and is it proportional? So my fear of tigers is a well-informed response. My fear of mice is not a well-informed response because mice aren't dangerous.
Right.
So at that point, we're looking at to see if it's right. Yeah.
So when somebody comes to see you, or when you're on a phone call with a client, how would you work that? Would you
Just
have
like I
them
described there.
kind of tune in? Okay.
100%. I say, okay, I want you to imagine taking the action. And I have
Okay.
them just visualize that. And then the next
Mhm.
question is, okay, what do you notice in your body?
Right.
And it's really just that simple, to just have them tune into the physical sensation. And then we ask the two questions. Ask the physical sensation what's afraid of. Ask it what proof does it have that this is a possibility or a probability. And typically inside of that, we find enough information that gives us an entry point to start doing work.
Do you run into, because I do sometimes when I'm asking people to kind of tune into their body, some people can't. I mean, they really don't know what's going on in their body. They're kind of cut off from that.
Yep.
How would you work with that?
So oftentimes when we do that sort of things, oftentimes people think that there's going to be a major thing.
Right.
And so for us, what it is I try and find the smallest possible thing that's there. Imagine yourself doing that. What's the thought that comes to mind? Or ask the question, what could go wrong if you
Yeah.
did this thing? Instead of what are you afraid of, what could go wrong? Give me all the scenarios where this goes badly. And oftentimes that's enough to get them
Okay.
going in the right direction.
Sure. Okay. Okay, great. So what once we kind of know what that resistance is, know what that self-sabotage is, how then do you help people get rid of it?
Right. So like I said, the first thing we do is we try and find a strategic solution. And so after talking through the strategic solution, we tune back into it again and we see if there's an emotional charge.
Right.
If the strategic solution solves it, then it solves it and that's great. If it's not, then we go to use whatever tool set makes sense to clear that stuff. For me, most of the time, it is tapping with other modalities laid over the top of it, but whatever works for you. I mean, it could be hypnosis, NLP, EMDR, like cognitive behavior therapy, like there are all of these different things. And so for me, it's kind of this two-step process. One, it's the uncovering, and then two, it's responding. For me, it's mostly we're tapping and using an NLP and a parts mediation kind of tool set laid over the top of that.
Okay.
But, you know, and that's just to give vocabulary to frame the work that we're doing while the tapping is doing the clearing and the transformation.
Okay. So could you give us an example of that? Would that be?
Yeah. Okay. So the simplest way to do this.
Okay.
So let's talk about what the process looks like, and then if you want me to demonstrate tapping,
Absolutely.
we'll go forward.
Yes.
So if you are doing this by yourself, the easiest tool that you can use is just to have a little conversation internally. So we've asked the questions, we've uncovered the information that this is dangerous because I'm afraid this is going to happen. And let's use the sales example, and let's use the emotional fear of judgment.
Okay.
So, you know, I'm afraid that if I ask you to buy and you say no, it's going to feel like you're saying my work isn't any good and you're judging me.
Right. Okay.
So the first thing I do while I'm tapping is I just articulate all of that.
Right.
And it would just be, I would just be like if you and I were sitting down for a cup of coffee and I was sharing a struggle with you, I'd say, you know, I really want to reach out, but I'm scared because I've worked so hard in this work and I believe in it so much. And when I share it with other people, I'm sharing a part of myself. And if I'm sharing a part of myself, they're going to say no. And that's going to really hurt because it feels like they're judging my work. So again, I'm just giving voice to what I emotionally believe and while I believe it while doing the tapping.
Okay.
Then I shift gears and then I pretend a friend of mine has just said that to me.
Okay.
And if a friend of mine said this to me, I would start giving them advice back. And the advice I would be giving my friend is, well, most of the time when people say no, they're just saying it's not the right fit for them, or they don't have time, or they don't understand it yet. So even though it's something that is personal that you believe in, it's not actually a value judgment of you. You say no to things all of the time where you're not judging the person who asked you, you're just saying it's not a good fit.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is that when we're caught inside of our emotion, we can't see that clearly. But if we pretend we're giving a friend advice, instantaneously we know exactly what to say to our friend.
Right.
And so in this circumstance, all we're doing is we're just bouncing back and forth through that conversation. So while I'm tapping and I'm using the tool set out loud, I just pretend that I'm having a conversation with myself. First, I do the side that's emotionally stuck. Then I do the friend giving advice. Then I'm emotionally stuck. Then I'm the friend giving advice. And I just bounce back and forth. And I just imagine that conversation. And that becomes enough of a framing tool while using this powerful tool, this tapping that actually physiologically unwind stuff in the subconscious mind. Those two things working together are the things that not just make me feel better in the moment, but reduce the belief enough for me to take action now and possibly take action forever as I clear that thing.
Good. Could you, just for the purpose of the audience who may or may not know about tapping, would you do a short demonstration?
So yeah, so the tapping protocol came about because Dr. Roger Callahan was working with clients. And in the early 80s, there was a lot of study around the power of acupuncture. And when these first studies about acupuncture came out, they found that not only was stimulating these points useful for pain management, it was also working for depression and phobias. And so in his practice, Callahan didn't want to go to acupuncture school because he didn't have 4 years to do that. But he thought, I wonder what would happen if we stimulated the points by simply tapping him. And there are over 250 points in the body. So he thought, well, I'm just going to pick the end point of each of these tapping channels, and each of these channels that Chinese medicine calls meridians. And if I tap on them, I wonder what will happen. So the first case study that he published was with a woman. He had done this for a while, but the first thing he published was with a woman who had a water phobia that was so severe she could not shower. Mm-hmm. After working with her for 23 minutes, she got into a swimming pool. And so this is really, really interesting. And so basically what we're doing with the protocol, like I said, with a little conversation, is we're just tuning into the issue. So I'm talking about the fear that I have, and I just move from tapping point to tapping point. So the tapping points that are most common, I'm going to give you the shortest version, and this is the version that I typically use with my clients. So like I said, the example I gave while having that conversation, you just move from point to point. Now, oftentimes what we do to start with is we tap on the karate chop point, which is the side of the hand, called the karate chop point, because if you were karate chopping, that's where you'd hit. Right. And typically what I do is I tap there and I just take 3 big deep breaths. And then the tapping points go tippy top of the head, eyebrow as far down on the eyebrow as you can get before you fall down on the bridge of the nose, side of the eye, which is as far forward as you can get without actually getting into the eye socket, right, under the eye, which is directly below the eye, under the nose, chin, which isn't the tippy point of the chin, but between the lip and the chin, collarbone. There's a point in here. It doesn't matter. I take a flat hand and I just tap like this. I hit the point. It doesn't matter where it is. And then under the arm, which is about bra height if you wear a bra, and it's just a little tender in there. Okay. And so when we just tap 6 to 7 times. So like the example I gave where I was just talking through, with each sentence I would move to a point. I'm really afraid that if I reach out, because I've invested so much in this, that when someone says no to me, they're saying that my work isn't any good and they're judging me. And then I switch. But I also recognize that I say no to people all of the time, and it's not a judgment of them. It's just because it's a bad fit for me. And so I would just bounce back and forth between the two sides of the conversation. And, you know, if you don't remember the tapping points from this quick little demonstration, if you search tapping points, there are 8 million images that are going to show up in Google search that show you where the tapping points are, that there's lots of resources out there. But it's really as simple as that. 2 simple caveats. One is don't get hung up with how long you spend on each tapping point. The second is don't do something that injures yourself. Like, don't go, well, I'm supposed to tap on this point, therefore I do it. Because some of the points can be really tender for a number of different reasons. Like this point right here is right on a sinus cavity. And as a person who has suffered from lots of sinus infections in my life, this area can be super tender for me. Wow. Some people have a real issue tapping on the tippy top of the head because there's this thing called your brain that is directly under there. And so don't do anything that is painful. If a point is too painful for you to tap, you can just touch and take a deep breath or rub. If it's too painful to do that, just skip the point. That it's not, we have to do every single one of the points, but it's the sum total of the work that is going to make a difference. And so take total responsibility for yourself. Don't say, Gene said to do this, therefore I need to do this to be successful. Like, tapping should not be physically painful. If it is physically painful, then you need to adjust your approach so it is not. Okay, great points. I love the different the points, the technique that you do, helping people with their strategy first, and then finding out what might be holding them back from that strategy, knowing that there's an emotional component as well. Right. Yeah. That's brilliant. So, Jean, I know that you have a free gift for the audience. Absolutely, yeah. Would you tell us what that is? Yeah, so I've put together a 10-part guide to eliminating self-sabotage. And basically the way that it is set up is there are articles, there are videos, there are audios, there are things that you can tap along to, there are things that teach you. But what it does is it kind of teaches you the mindset that we've talked about today. How do we uncover and dissect the limiting belief or the emotion that is in the way, and then how do we clear it out? It's broken down into 10 tiny little chunks so that you are not overwhelmed by it. And so basically what happens is when you get it, every single day you get one of the parts so that you're never spending more than 4 or 5 minutes digesting a part. And you're going to come away with being able to clear some of that resistance with each of the steps. And you're going to be in a circumstance where you just have a little more capacity, so it's easier for you to do it on your own. So basically what I did was I just took a bunch of the best of resources that I had and put them into a systematized way so it just leads you through. And so if you do these things, you will find right away as you do these steps, you're going to be taking action more effortlessly, and you're going to become more aware when you are sabotaging yourself so that you can start doing the work to uncover it.
Perfect. I might download that too. So for the audience, below the video, there's a big button that says download this gift. So that's how you can go and get Jean's gift very easily. So Jean, I've really enjoyed talking with you and getting to know you a bit and more about what you do. As you know, I do tapping as well. So it's always fun to see how other people are
Absolutely.
using it. Yeah. So, and thank you for the audience for being on the Rewrite Your Money Story series. And tune in tomorrow for our next expert who's going to be talking about the invisible chains that hold you back from getting what you want. So I'll see you then. Okay.